could just see like a parent being like, no, you're absolutely right. Like the parent being in victim, and then there's like a 3-year-old child being like, the grass is greener over here, and they're in creator mode, like creating their best life as a toddler. Like it just doesn't make like
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So we are starting this episode with a little bit of a confession. We have just finished recording the episode you are about to hear, and we had fully intended to make this episode about understanding the shapes in the context of movies. That was the plan. We talked about it in our last episode. You'll hear from the intro. That's what we are expecting we are about to record. And somewhere early on, we found a rabbit hole and slid all the way down it. And it was a really important rabbit hole to do justice to. So we got to a certain point through the process, and we realized we're not recording about movies today. We are recording about, and there's a number of things we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about different ways and different things that affect the shapes and how the shapes are going to apply in certain situations. One thing that we talk about a lot in this is about how the shapes relate to children, parenting, those kind of dynamics. And there are some very common patterns that we see that I think on the surface people are going to go, oh yeah, it's drama triangle. And maybe, possibly-ish. Maybe a little bit, but not really. And so you'll see, we're going to share a lot more about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about where you have situations where there might be a power dynamic that might affect the shapes. It's not quite as clear cut when there's a power dynamic involved. And we're also going to talk about situations where the harm dynamic is clearer and a little bit less clear, and how you can start to notice when it's a little bit less clear, and therefore start to speak about these situations, really naming what it is that's happening. As I said, we didn't expect this episode to go the way that it did. When that is what's up, like when that's the content is there in front of us, we just have to go with it. You will hear the moment where, in fairness, the moment where I realized this was happening was probably about 15 minutes before I actually mentioned it. But you'll hear the moment where I was like, yeah, this is not what we're not doing movies today.
It was 25 minutes, and I looked at our timestamp, and I was like, I knew it at that point, which I think was like a half hour before you even said anything. Like we were on the same page.
I think I was about 20 minutes in when I realized it. So it was very much around the same point. And we wanted to make sure that we did this little intro just to set expectations, because obviously if you're listening to this, I mean, the name of the episode will be different. But if you listen to the beginning and like, oh, they're going to talk about the movie stuff today. And especially because we said we would at the end of the last episode, that we didn't want you to be disappointed. The movies episode is coming. In fact, it's already been recorded. We actually we recorded more than one episode today. The last time we recorded was the movies episode, so that is going to be coming next week. I promise. It's already done. It's already in the bank, so we will make sure that is definitely going out. And I do think like having just recorded that, it's going to be really, really helpful for a lot of people in starting to understand these dynamics better. And wait until the end of that episode, because there's a little unexpected twist. There's a movie that neither of us saw coming in terms of how it was representative of some of the shapes. And both of us are kind of think it's kind of cool that we ended up with the example that we did to finish up with. So do come back and listen to that. But the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is really important. And we just wanted to say, trust us. Thank you for listening. We hope that you find this as helpful and informative as you will the next episode. We'll lead the way for you to enjoy today's episode. Thanks for being here. Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So for anybody who is watching on the video, I just want you to know that I've managed to find a top that has red, black, and green in it, because we're going to be discussing all three shapes today. Like, just the little things that make me smile. I don't really expect anyone else to care, but it makes me smile that I've managed to do this. So
it's funny. I don't creating your own smiles.
I know, right? I don't think I've ever worn this to record a podcast episode. And I was like going through my tops, and I was like, ooh, that one has all colors in it. Like, yay.
I don't know. I'm missing the cowgirl hat with that one.
That's true. This was, I'd originally bought this because I was in a local performance, and I think it was Country Week, wasn't it? Was the theme of the week. And I was singing Casey Tunstall's Black Horse and the Cherry Tree. So the reason it's got all those colors on it is it's a black top with cherries on it and cherry blossoms. And so I had a very, very heavily rhinestoned belt and a rhinestone cowboy hat and some fabulous boots that went with it. So
I forgot I have too bad we didn't plan it out, because I have that same kind of top. Actually, I don't know if it's been a couple of years since I put it on. Who knows if it actually fits anymore.
Well, but I think you've worn this on previous podcast episodes. I thought that as I was pulling it out.
Well, I think I've also worn the dress too.
Oh, possibly. Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not talking about our clothing choices today. And it's important to get into content right now, because we have a lot to go through on this episode. And it was funny because I was talking to a friend a couple of weeks ago about the new shape. And if you don't know what the new shape is, what are you doing here? Go back and listen to our last episode. Like, go and learn about the harm dynamic, the black shape. I'm only joking. I mean, you don't have to, but it will make a lot more sense if you've listened to the rest of the shapes episodes before you listen to this one. Trust me on that. So I was talking to this friend who understands a little bit about what we do. And so I was kind of doing a little overview of the drama triangle and the empowerment ecosystem and the harm dynamic. And they were like, I think it would be really helpful if there was some examples to help me really get this even more. And the good thing is there are examples of this shit everywhere you go. Well, most of it. Some of it's a little harder to spot because there's less of it about the rest of it. But generally speaking, you do see a lot of examples of this everywhere. But one of the things that I think that sometimes can really help is when the situation that we're looking at is fictional in nature, because it gives us the ability to be less invested in it. Although, I mean, to be quite honest, the way that some people are with certain movies, you may be more invested if it's one of your favorite movies. So I can't help with that. But so what we decided was to look at some of the most well-known movies and look for examples of the shapes dynamics in those movies. Now, there's a few really important things to say. The first thing is that anything we are speaking to is almost certainly going to be momentary in nature. There are some that are a little bit more long-term, but the majority of the things we're referring to, they're moments where these things are happening. And you will also see from some of the examples we give how quickly things can move between different shapes and triangles and positions within the shapes and what have you. And it's important to also say that all of the examples that we are giving, and all of these examples generally in life, are all pretty nuanced and not necessarily as simple as they might seem. And they're not always necessarily going to be, it wouldn't necessarily apply to all situations that are similar in nature. So I just want to caveat what we're saying by beginning by saying these are just some generic examples. Nuance always, it's my favorite word, even though the narwhal is out of reach right now. I have the unicorn next to me, but the narwhal is having a nap over there with a little niggle monster from the Clearing Niggles episode from our friendship series. So yeah, I just nuance. And so be very mindful and careful of oversimplifying these things. I think this is one of the things that happens very often with the needs work, is that people tend to oversimplify. And when you oversimplify it and overgeneralize it, then all of a sudden you get yourself into trouble, because it's hold on. Oh,
it's not a
yeah.
fixed label to assign to somebody either. And that's
Yeah,
what people do. They're like,
exactly.
oh, victim, persecutor, rescuer. And it's like, hey, we're talking about approaches, not
Right.
like the being of the people. And
Yes.
like we said, it switches so quickly that you have to like, you kind of have to be on your toes, because there have been situations where I'm like, oh, this person's solidly in persecutor, and it's like you're trying to approach them based on where they are, and then I'm like, oh, what the, now you're in victim. All right, switching it up now. Like,
yeah, and it is like it can happen on a dime. And one thing that's important to say is that sometimes it can be helpful for you to recognize these things looking back on a situation, because sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to spot when it's happening, but you look back and you go, oh, I think I might have been rescuer approach then. Oops. Oh, and that put me in persecutor approach. Oh no. And then I felt bad about it, but I came at that feeling bad from victim approach. Oh no. Like
I'm all
it's
the
so
things.
easy. I'm all the things. And that again was in like a 30-second window of time, and there's been 12 other shifts between now and then. So it's
I've been there so many times.
Yes. That's why we're laughing, because we're like, yeah, been there, done that. I mean, I only have a black, white, and green shirt. I have an entire wardrobe full of shirts from every shape imaginable, I promise you, and every position in every shape imaginable. So the interesting thing was that when we started talking about this, we started talking about doing this last week, and we were talking about what are like some of the best known movies. We have very different perspectives on this based on the side of the pond that we're on. I would just like to start by saying that. Yes. And also because of our inclinations in terms of our preferences in terms of movies. I think that has a huge effect on it as well. But the interesting thing is that a number of the suggestions that we both came up with actually involved characters who were children, as in the character in that. So one of the examples we came up with was The Wizard of Oz, which Serena thought everyone knew inside out and back to front, and I'm like, I think I maybe have seen it twice.
I was
30 years ago.
What was your childhood like? Every September I sat by the TV being like, it's coming on, like before DVR and like on demand. Like you had to wait for that one I think it was a Thursday in September every year. It would play once, and that's all you got all year. Like
that's amazing. Like, no, definitely that was not a thing. I mean, like A Christmas Story, I'd never seen that. So like there have been lots of,
but I've never seen A Wonderful Life. So like, there we go.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, in fairness, I hadn't seen it for the longest time. It was an ex-partner of mine who it was like his favorite movie. So I mean, again, all down to our various influences. Now, the interesting thing about, so Serena came up with The Wizard of Oz, and I came up with Wicked as like let's look at what's going on in the dynamics in both of these movies, because it's a really interesting way of looking at it. Because if you know the stories well, and I will do my best throughout this to try not to spoil any of the movies. Some of them I'm not going to be able to help because the example warrants me doing that, but
we'll try to put potential spoiler alerts in for specific examples, like in the show notes, be like,
well, yeah, we'll let you know what the time codes are for the movies we're talking about, so you can skip over whichever ones if you need to. And there's only a couple of examples where there's actual like spoilers that I think will be a problem. But when it came to like the good thing with The Wizard of Oz and Wicked is the whole essence of Wicked, the stage show, the movie, whichever one no matter which one you're looking at, is to look at that story from a different perspective and realizing that this person is not what everyone is perceiving them to be. It's a little bit like with Maleficent was the same thing, where if you've seen Sleeping Beauty, and the Maleficent is like the origin story of the Wicked Queen from Sleeping Beauty. And again, once you see what this person has gone through, you understand them much better. Like it's one of the toughest things I think about modern cinema is like the amount of empathy you can feel for a villain when you humanize them, because that's our humanity. When our humanity comes out, it's like, oh, I see that. Like I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand how you got where you got, sort of thing.
You're channeling it in a fucked up way, and
yes, not good choices, but I can understand how we got to those choices. So like there was a famous line, and I haven't seen this movie yet, so I can't speak to it. Where somebody saw the movie Joker for the first time and was like, I can't believe they got me to empathize with the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on my list to watch. You never
Both
know, we
of
may
them.
do another
I
one
have
of
to
these.
say, both of them.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
Dark Knight was the first one, and then
Yes.
Joker is the second one.
Yes.
And both of them, it was like,
yes,
I want to hate you, but there's and that's the character you love to hate type of like.
and I think that's the big thing with like that. It's the whole like the meme of the villain origin story. Like when you see the origin story, there's a logic to how they ended up where they ended up. I said not good choices, and different choices could have been made, and it doesn't mean to say we're accepting it. Anyway, all of that to one side for a second. The reason that we are not including The Wizard of Oz or Wicked or some of the other examples that we had in here is that when it comes to situations with children, it's not as applicable in the same way as it is when we're talking about adults. And I'm going to bring you in on a conversation that Serena and I had before recording this episode, because we have both seen examples of what Serena's about to describe in so many situations, in so many areas. And Serena asked me a question, and that question was...
I don't even remember how I asked it, but like...
You gave an example. Let's give the kind of generic example that we've both seen. Yeah.
So the example is when you have a parent who has set a boundary with a child. Let's just say a no. Like, I want to do this, and the parent is like, or the adult in the situation is like, no, we're not doing this. Here are your other choices. However they handle it.
Just 1 second. Just before we go any further, that's not actually technically a boundary. A boundary is what you will do if somebody does something. And then in the parenting situation, that's more talking about consequences. So it's like, let's just say the parent is saying no without putting other labels on it for the moment.
Okay. So no, we got the no. And the child all of a sudden goes, but please, or like does something, like they make you feel they're pulling on your heartstrings in a way. Like it might not be overtly, it might be a look, it may be like all of a sudden just fall into the victim hole. Like the
head goes down.
And I was asked, like,
or maybe they cry, or
they have a reaction, like in that and they have a reaction that is one that we've kind of grown to expect from children. Like it's not surprising when you have a child pouting because they're not getting what they want. Like we kind of associate the two together. Isn't that, and what I had asked Claire was like, isn't that the child being like properly in the victim role, because they kind of know what they're doing, because they realize that
yes and no.
Like so this is why I couldn't repeat the question, because we had all of this dialogue around it.
So
and
basically what was happening, because I was saying that the victim triangle, so the drama triangle and the empowerment ecosystem don't apply to children in the same way they do to adults. And Serena was like, hold on a second, I've seen this dynamic over and over again where adult says, like parent, adult, caregiver, guardian says no, child drops into floods of tears, parent, caregiver, guardian comes in and rescues the child from that by giving them what they want, and so the cycle continues,
or persecutes them for acting in the
punishes
way,
them.
like,
Yes, absolutely.
or turns into the victim themselves, like, oh, I can't ever give you enough or do anything. I mean, I've seen it all in the same situation too, and I'm like, oh, gee, you are like
ding 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 ding. And then if there's actual like if they're being punished, then that can sometimes move into the harm dynamic, and like this, it gets very fucking messy. And I was like, I can see why you see it that way. Like that makes a lot of sense from what we understand and what we know. The challenge is that the first thing is that children have learned these behavior patterns. And they've learned them from the people who are around them, influencing them. So parents, grandparents, TV, movies, friends, teachers, all those sorts of things. Children don't grow up learning. They don't get born with the drama triangle in their system. I mean, technically, transgenerational trauma, that may not be the case. But like generally speaking, like there are that yes and no. Again, nuance. But generally speaking, they don't operate from that place as a natural tendency as human beings, which means that in order for that dynamic to be existing, they've been taught that. they've been conditioned into that. Either they've been conditioned into it because they've seen it,
Mm-hmm.
or because once upon a time when something happened, they reacted a certain way and they got what they wanted, and there was okay, this is how this works. Because bear in mind, all children are actually really great at getting their needs met. Like, that's one of the things that they're really good at, because they don't have any of the social conditioning that blocks us and thinking, oh, and I'm not worthy of that, or I shouldn't be doing that, or blah blah blah. Generally speaking, again, exceptions to the rule depending on the situation, but they've been conditioned into that way of behaving. So they have been taught that, and they haven't been taught or guided into other ways of doing things. Now, the other thing is also, bear in mind that they don't have the the brain development to be able to process emotions in the same way that adults can. They don't have like if you have a 4-year-old that's doing something versus a 7-year-old that's doing something versus a 10-year-old that's doing something versus a 14-year-old, we're talking about very different things, because sometimes it does literally feel like the world is ending to them, and their response is actually proportional to their view of what is happening in the world from the ability they have to process their emotions. So this may not be a manipulation. Like, I think that's the thing. This is always viewed as a manipulation, and sometimes that is just not the case. They are having an appropriate response given where they're at in their development and how what has happened has impacted them in the context of that point in their development. But the most important thing is that a child is a dependent. They do not have the ability to meet their own needs for themselves without the support of their parents and caregivers. Now, what this means is it's not possible for a child to get into the creator approach, completely into the creator approach, unless there is support from their environment and from the people immediately around them in doing so. And even then, it's still not, they're not ultimately responsible for their needs, again, depending on the age and the development and what have you. Yes, you can start to teach them about these things. Yes, you can teach them different ways of approaching the situation. There's a whole bunch of things. First things first, show me an instance where that's happening, where the parent is in the empowerment ecosystem. That's my first thing. Because the parent is there as the guide. The parent is there to lead the way. The parent is there to demonstrate how things work and to act as the role model.
I could just see like a parent being like, no, you're absolutely right. Like the parent being in victim, and then there's like a 3-year-old child being like, the grass is greener over here, and they're in creator mode, like creating their best life as a toddler. Like it just doesn't make
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
So they're not able to do that. And even when they have the support of their parents in learning about this and starting to do this, they still don't have ultimate responsibility for it. So they can't fully get into creator approach until they are in the position where they have the ability, capacity, and they're at that developmental age where it is appropriate for them to take 100% responsibility for themselves, their life, and their needs. Which means that you can start to guide kids to this, and also recognize that you're not dealing with another adult. So you cannot expect them to interact with you the way another adult would interact. If you have trained them basically to responding in a certain way, this is a point for you to get into creator. And the interesting thing is that I saw a video on this. I've seen a couple of videos on this sort of thing recently. I saw a video on this, I think it was just this morning, where the person was the person was talking about parent and child relationships, and they were saying about, and I wasn't paying 100% attention. I was doing other stuff while I was doing it, so I may not get this exactly representative of what was said, but they were basically saying that the dynamic between a parent and child is always going to be like imbalanced, because the child didn't have the ability to choose to be here. They were talking basically about like needs being met, like how it's always going to be a lopsided thing, because the parent is responsibility, like they've chosen to take responsibility for meeting this other being's needs by having a child, and the entire relationship is the foundation of it is that the parent is or caregiver, depending on the situation, is stronger, wiser. Like that is the dynamic that's set up from the get-go, which means that anything that happens within these dynamics is being led by the parent. Whether they are intending to, whether they are aware of the fact they're doing it, whether they want to be doing it is another thing. And this is not a criticism of parents going, well, if you've got this dynamic going on, you've created it. Nobody gave us a manual for this stuff. We don't get taught this stuff, which means that we're doing the best we can with the information we have, having been conditioned our entire lives into the drama triangle. So this is not you've done something wrong by doing this. It's about recognizing and understanding that because of that imbalance and because of that bigger, stronger, wiser perception that exists within the parent and child, it's the parent's responsibility to lead. So the parent needs to do like creator mode. What's the first thing that I need to do? If I'm dysregulated by what's going on, I've got to regulate myself first and foremost. I might only have a split second to do it. I've got to like some deep breaths or like whatever it is to support my vagus nerve maybe in order to help me in this moment and resource me. And then I'm going to start to help cultivate a situation where I'm supporting the child in starting to learn, how does a creator approach things? And like, if you ask a 4-year-old, what's your outcome? Chances are they may not know. So at that point, maybe it might be, well, what is it that you want right now? Do you want this, or this? And give them some choices of actually, I want this right now. Okay, so what are some ways that we create this? We could do this and this and this. And you can start to guide them through that process in order to, like, because again, it's like a lot of these times, I'm about to have some music blasting in my ears because I just tapped my earbuds by mistake. But like sometimes, like, what the kid is melting down to is that they've got a shortcut in their mind, which is that I have I want this thing. That's not what they want. They want the need that having that thing is going to meet. That's the only way that they know to get that need met right now. So we can provide them with some other things that might meet their needs, that need in the same way. And if they have feelings about not having the thing, it's about saying, it's okay that you feel the way that you do. It's okay. It's disappointing right now. And like, let's like, it's okay for you to have a good old cry about it. Why don't we stomp our feet? Why don't we shake our bodies to get this out of our systems? Like, these are all things we can do by being in creator mode ourselves to start to teach our children about creator mode and start to get things moving more in the green direction, while recognizing we have the responsibility of providing that environment for them because they don't have the ability to provide it for themselves yet.
I think something that's really important with this is, as we're trying to recondition children, because that's basically what we're doing at this point, is trying to recondition children into the empowerment ecosystem, like to be operating from the empowerment ecosystem. And I think consistency is really, really, really important in this, because there are so many times that I've been in situations where the caregiver is like, well, generally they're a good child, or this is like a one-off situation. They're not normally like this, or they're very adult in all situations. Like, people are like, oh, the best behaved child in the world, and then they get with certain adults or caregivers and it is a totally different child, because like there's different dynamics, there's different shapes going on, but that consistency of like, no, this is we operate from the empowerment ecosystem. And yes, there's coping that's involved. Like, I've seen parents that are just like, just need to fucking give, like,
yes,
we just need to do this. So, and that's a choice. In there's a lot of personal power. There's a choice in there. But I don't think that choice is the conscious, like, I don't think that choice is as conscious as it needs to be for the amount that I see this inconsistency in. Yeah, like a good kid is like, I was a good kid. I also could have really, really used some consistency in my empowerment ecosystem, because like,
and so, and because what is that? So what is that? What is consistency for a child? I'm curious. I put her on the spot here.
Consistency would be the adult operating from the empowerment ecosystem.
Yes. That's sorry that I phrased the word I phrased the question badly. What is consistency giving that child?
Stability.
Which is meeting
their needs.
Which one?
I mean, technically all of them, but their security need, which is
ding, 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 ding. Yes. So the reason that consistency is so important is because it creates this environment that they're around it all the time. So they are getting, they're absorbing it constantly. And this is the thing, is that it's so important that you're not just doing it with your children, that you're doing it, like, remember, children learn more from what we do than what we say. So like we can teach them about it, but if they see us operating in a different way, that's never going to work. So the more they can see us operating this way, and a little bit like with, like, if you're teaching a child anything, you're going to you do the thing, and you often explain as you're doing it why you're doing the things you're doing it, so that they can understand why we're doing this, what we're doing, how we're approaching it. And so by doing that, that's the thing that they're going to learn from. And by doing it consistently, you are supporting their security need. And one of the things that is so important for children in terms of their needs met is the security. Yes, there's foundation function underneath that as well. And security and foundation function end up kind of interplaying with each other, because if your security need is met, then your foundation function needs really have to be met, because you would only feel secure if they were met. And so by meeting your security need, you may actually meet your foundation function need, and vice versa. So there's like a little symbiotic relationship that happens there between those two needs. But in order for a child to learn, to grow, to explore, they need to feel secure. Like I think have we done an episode on the attachment styles? Yeah, I think we've mentioned them certainly in previous episodes.
I'm not sure how in depth, but I know we do have at least a reference that we'll throw in the show notes.
We've definitely mentioned it in the past, and maybe this is an episode that we'll do at some point in the future, is like when we're talking about attachment styles, ultimately what we want to get to is a secure attachment style. And a secure attachment style is created when a child's needs are consistently met. Now, it doesn't need to doesn't mean they need to be met 100% all the times in the ultimate best possible way. I actually saw something, and I have it somewhere. I don't remember what the actual number was, but I think it was something like, I think that a child's needs need to be met. It was a smaller percentage than I thought it was, in order for them to feel secure. So like, don't worry if you're not the perfect Stepford mum, that you don't need to be doing that in order for your child's needs to be met. But by that consistency of how you are interacting with them, but also how they see you interacting with other people, and how they see these things being demonstrated. Because if they see you, like, if you in a lot of these situations, I've seen this myself with situations where you have parents who have separated, and the guilt over the separation causes them to cave to the child's desires on a pretty consistent basis. And what can end up happening is that there's an animosity between the parents that have split. And so the child sees the drama triangle playing out in the people they see interacting with each other on a regular basis, and that's how they learn, that's how they do things. Like, that children often don't discern, they just learn from what they see, and they learn from seeing what they see people do. And so this, like, that when they see those interactions happening, they end up then being in a position where they're like, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. Now, I know it can be incredibly difficult when you are interacting with somebody where there is animosity, and if you still can try to, like, even if you're in the harm dynamic, even if there is harm being done to you, it's about being in creator mode with how you are relating to that harm. And if you explain to your child, this is how I'm doing, this is what we're doing, this is why I'm doing it this way, because it's going to be better for me. So even if you can't get the interaction with the people you're around to be within the empowerment ecosystem, if they see you operating from the empowerment ecosystem in how you are relating to the things that are going on at work, and the things that are going on with your family, and the things that are going on with your ex, and the things that are going on with your friends, if they see that being your consistent way of operating, that's the thing that they're going to learn, and that's the thing that they're going to absorb.
Something that came to me while you were talking is, a lot of times I feel like in these situations, the caregiver can fall into the victim role and feel almost like the victim of their child or the child involved, and like they have to do something. And Claire and I were talking about it earlier, where I all of a sudden realized I've become my mother, which, I mean, if anybody's had that realization, it's like, oh, fuck. And one of the things was, my mom was always very big on her boundaries. She was like, my friends were wary of her growing up because she had boundaries. You knew where she was coming from. there
Mm-hmm.
was as much inconsistency as there may have been in other areas. Like that was one place she was consistent. You always kind of knew what you were getting. You knew where the lines were. You knew you weren't going to be able to pull
Yeah.
the wool over
Whether you
her
liked it or
eyes. And
not.
exactly, like just be upfront.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this like real kind of clarity in the relationship she had with the dependents around her, myself included. And
Mm-hmm.
as I'm coming into that age, I feel very much in that same role where we know I'm boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And I see these dynamics and I try to always come from that empowerment approach, which isn't always agreeable to children because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
placate to them in the way that they necessarily feel that they are. It doesn't garner the same results as they want usually.
Right.
And
Well, go on.
And I feel like this kind of like, I don't feel like at one point I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the funnest person in the world. Like I don't think at the age that some of my babies are at that I am the fun person anymore. It's like that I'm stern,
Mm-hmm.
that like I have rules and I have a container.
Okay,
Not like a container, like, but
no, hold on. I think that I'm going to challenge the thing you said, and I'm going to support the thing I think you're about to try and change. So
okay.
I don't think you're stern. I think that you have clear boundaries, and I think you're direct in communicating them. That doesn't mean say you're unkind. You're still kind
Right.
and compassionate in how you communicate them, and you're still mindful of the impact it's going to have on them. But you're doing that not just for your good, but for their good as well. And I think that what you are providing is a container. It's a safe container that they can operate in. Because I think that a lot of kids are like, and if you think about it, when you're a kid, like you want to have freedom, you want to be able to do whatever the hell you want. Until you start find out kids that were allowed to do whatever they wanted. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of those people come back and go, I would have given anything to have had some, I mean, people tend to frame it as like to have some rules. Now we know we go with principles versus rules. If you haven't, I'm sure we've talked about that on a previous episode on the principles versus rules. If not, we will do that again in an upcoming episode. We will find out very soon. But some kind of structure. And I think that the problem is that people tend to think of structure or container as being this rigid thing. And especially people like us, because I mean, Serena has said it in the past. We don't like going into boxes.
Fuck
your box. I knew that was coming out. So
that's why when I said it's like a container, I'm like, ew.
But if you think about a container and a structure, it allows something to be supported. And that's the thing, a structure provides the support for something to be built on top of it. A container, if you imagine, like if you had some of the plants I have around my room, they were just on the floor, they're not going to have the thing that's going to contain everything that they need in order to be nourished and grow and to be supported. So, and yeah, like for example, like I have, I'm using this as an example. Like I literally have a plant in front of me right now and it's in a pot. And there's a hole in the bottom of the pot because, yeah, we don't want it to be completely contained. There needs to be some room to breathe, and maybe, and as the plant grows, we might need to put it in a bigger pot or a bigger pot, or maybe we go out and put it in the garden because it's better. It's going to be better for what it needs in that respect. And the same is true with children. There isn't an element of like we want to provide the support for them, and sometimes before they understand what the limits need to be, before they understand what's safe and what's dangerous, what is where they can push and where they actually need to be a little bit more mindful, where it's worth taking the risk versus you're going to end up breaking every bone in your body if you do that. And before they know that, maybe you do need to be a little bit more contained. Maybe you do need to be a little bit more supportive. Like if you think about like, thinking about like if you have like a set of eggs and you put them in an incubator and they like the chicks stay in a contained space before, like in a nest, like they will stay in the nest until they're ready to fly the nest. But the nest is there to keep them safe and to provide the support they need while they are growing, in order that then when they have grown, they can fly and they understand and they can play with those boundaries. They can play with those limits, play with the and there are going to be times where they're going to test the extent of the container. And at that point, it's a little bit like the plant. Sometimes it tests the edge and you go, oh, hold on, we need a bigger container for this. Like actually that original container doesn't work anymore. And as they grow, there's going to be a point where it's like, oh no, actually we need to put it in a bigger container now. There's still a container there, but and actually maybe it's like, oh no, now they've pushed it and actually this container doesn't work anymore. Now's the time to go and plant them out in the garden.
Well, and I see your container and I agree, but fuck your lid. Do not put a lid on it. Like, all right, as long as we can grow up and out where I get the, yeah, the little
I know
containers
you
and
don't need a lid, but sometimes if you have like flying things, there needs to be a lid
yes,
for a period until they learn
yes.
how to fly. So yeah, don't worry. I will not. Honey, I couldn't contain you if I tried. Like nobody could contain you if you tried. You don't need to worry about boxes or lids or anything else. Like we're talking about for the support of kids as they are going through that process.
And something to add on to that is, you know, when I'm talking about like my relationship with the children in my life, I'm pretty standardized. My relationship, like how I respond to children, is the same way I respond to adults. And when I say that, it's not like I'm bringing adult content or concepts or anything, but like if I'm going to have a boundary with an adult, I'm going to probably have a very similar boundary with a child. And there's been many instances as I've grown with some children and people are like, "Oh, your relationship is so much different than with them than their relationship with XYZ." And it's like, because this is the relationship I've been cultivating for however long, because you can't expect a child who grows up, let's say they grow up and all of a sudden they're 13, 14 years old, and then you're like, okay, now we're going to start treating you the way that I think our relationship could go.
Now we're going to put a boundary, and they're going to go, what the hell's a boundary? Where did that come from? Nobody told me about this. Like, what?
Yeah, and I was saying to Claire about like kind of how my mother was, like my cousin. When I look back at like my childhood, I was, gosh, she was kind of like bitchy when it like there weren't like these coddling warm fuzzies that I was used to getting from everybody else trying to rescue me and placate me, but there was never a heart like.
So I think that, and here's where the rub is, here's where the balance is, because I think that you are absolutely right in the sense that you set effective boundaries. Your mother also set boundaries. Let's put it that way. The difference between the two of you, and she garnered affection and respect and a connection with people because of that boundary. They knew where they stood with her. So there was an element of security in that. It wasn't always security in how it was communicated. And that's the thing that you have learned. And that's the thing that you do differently, which is you provide the boundary. And when you were saying that you deal with kids in the same way as you do with adults, and in the sense that you still set boundaries, but the key thing is that you communicate in a way that the child can understand, in a way that you wouldn't necessarily communicate with an adult, in the same way as if you can communicate with an adult that doesn't understand certain concepts and an adult that does. The conversation is different. So I think that you've learned to be more you are aware of the needs that can be compromised when somebody is spoken to in a certain way that your mum maybe wasn't as aware of. So I think that what you've done is you've taken something that was a good kind of foundational piece, which is the boundary piece, and creating that consistency, and meaning that when a child comes to you, they know what they're going to get, and they know that you're going to be straight with them. They know that you're going to be honest with them. They know that you're going to sometimes say things that they don't like, not because you're being mean, but because they want something that isn't in alignment with what their best needs are at that point in time. But I think that you've learned to communicate that in a way where it doesn't mean to say they're not going to have reaction, but also if they have a reaction, you're going to be empathetic to that, and you're going to support their reaction as well as setting the boundary.
And their reaction it no longer pulls me into that drama triangle. I can still be like, okay. And because they're a child, there is a different lens on it. But like, there's so many times in the past where I would have gotten sucked back into that drama triangle because of a child. And that's what happens to a lot of caregivers. Like now I'm like, no, this is the relationship I want to cultivate with this child because they're important to me. I don't want to get to the point where they're a teenager and an adult and I'm like, I can't stand this person because the relationship I cultivated with them wasn't in alignment with how I want to operate in my daily life with the people that I want to be in relationship with.
I mean, I've been in these situations with children myself where they are used to when something doesn't go the way they want it to, they're used to going and sitting in a corner by themselves, looking all sad, and everyone rushing into them. Oh, what's wrong? What's da-da-da-da? And I will say, like, are you okay? And a lot of the time I get the silent treatment. I'm like, okay, like if you want to tell me what's going on, I might be able to help you, but I can't help you if I don't understand what's going on. Like, and if you don't want to talk, that's okay as well. And I will keep checking in with them, because again, they don't have the emotional maturity and the cognitive ability in the same way as an adult was. I mean, if I seen speaking to an adult who's sitting in the corner just not saying anything and looking sad, and I asked them a couple of times and and I'm like, okay, at this point it's your choice. I'm like, I'm not gonna keep on trying something that is not clearly working. So it's different, because you have to operate in accordance with the level of development that they are at and what their cognitive and emotional ability is. But I will, and they know if they come to me, I will find a fix. Like, I will help them to, and again, I'm not going to fix it for them. I'm going to help them figure out. But they also know they need to talk to me, and they won't, like, if they just go, and I've had them where they come up to me and they're like, and I'm like, okay, I need to be able to hear what you're saying so I can understand in order to fix the problem. You want to try that again? And then they come on a bit more. I didn't quite catch all of that. Can you like try it one more time? Because if I understand fully what's going on, I can help you come up with a solution to this that's going to feel better for you. And at that point, and again, so it's not like and the amount of people in that situation, like, for God's sake, would you speak up? I don't understand a word you're saying. And in that moment, you're in a persecutor approach, and you're probably also in the harmer position, because and that's going to add to the anxiety and the tension and the stress of the situation. It's not going to de-escalate it, like we were talking about last time. And so in these situations, like, it's our responsibility as the adult in the dynamic to lead these conversations, to lead the way of operating, and to drop into supporter role, because you can still approach a child as if they are in creator approach, even if they can't yet fully engage in the empowerment ecosystem yourself. You can still you can still come into that supporter role, ask questions to be able to like, I can imagine maybe you might be feeling a bit frustrated right now because you haven't got the thing you've wanted. It's okay to be frustrated. I feel frustrated sometimes. Like, maybe it would be a good idea to like, why don't we try and get some of that frustration out? Maybe we stomp our feet, or maybe we dance a little bit, or maybe we like punch the air, or maybe we shake our bodies. You keep offering questions. And if they were like, maybe you want some space right now, would you like a little bit of space? You want some time just by yourself to like feel a bit, and then we can figure something out. Like, you can talk them through the process, because they don't know how to do this. Like, this is not something that they have been born with the innate ability to do. And I'm like, before I can see you coming back in again, which we're going to get to in just a second, I'm making an executive decision right now. We're not doing movies today. Apparently we're going we're going to do movies in the next episode, because this conversation is so important. We will change the name of this, so the intro is going to stay the same, because you're going to like we'll do another little, we'll add a little intro section that we will go back and we'll record, and we'll bolt onto the beginning, so when you come to it, you don't get disappointed halfway through. We're going to change the name of the episode so you know what we're talking about in this episode. But this is such important content. This is so important to discuss. And I was starting to watch the time, and I'm like, yeah, we're not doing movies today. We'll do that in the next episode. It's coming, I promise, but it will be next time. So carry on with what
the rabbit hole
just
we just have to succumb to the rabbit hole. It's like, all right, we're here. Well, and I think something like children aren't like, they're everything we do every single second of every single day is done to meet our needs. And some of that stuff is like a natural response to what we need. These little tools and tricks that we talk about on this show aren't things that kids normally know. So to go to a child and ask these questions and be like, do you want some alone time? I know there are times where I just like people to fuck all the way off and just leave me alone. And
I mean, we don't maybe use that language depending on the age of the child and what their parents want us to say, but
yeah, that's just me. Like, I'm hoping the kid wants to bug her off, but yeah. Look at me. The English is just implanting itself.
Yeah.
But like, I can't, when you said the whole, do you need some time alone? Like, I know a lot of children who that would really help. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very rare to hear that kind of, it's almost like, I don't want to say adult, like, it almost sounds adult to be like, do you need some personal space? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that child might need personal space, and like bringing that to their attention then puts that in their own little internal needs menu. It might be filed all the way in the back, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, maybe I just need space. Like, maybe I
Right.
need to be away from this, because a lot of children are put into the situations that the adult or the caregiver in the situation has put them into. Like, they don't
Right.
really have, they feel like they have to be here. Like, oh, I don't know that I like space is an option. Like, I can't just walk away from this because I'm having a meltdown. Or maybe they've tried to walk away to get space and they've gotten, you know, persecuted because, like, oh, you're just walking away from it, or don't run away, or like,
Yeah. Well, and this
there's
is
so
one
much
of the
nuance.
reasons that, yeah, I mean, there is so much nuance in this. And this is not like a Claire and Serena's Guide to Parenting, follow the steps and you'll be fine. This is, like I said, there's a lot of nuance and in this. I think that's one of the reasons that the more that we can do to bring options and choice into our children's world, the better. Because what it does is it teaches them to look for options, and it teaches them to choose the options that work for them. Can they choose everything at all times? No. Does ice cream for dinner every single day of the week work? No. And there's sometimes where it's okay to give your kid ice cream for dinner on the odd occasion, if that's what they decide that they want. That's not going to do any kind of lasting harm. But I think that sometimes we forget that because so much of their world is controlled, they have there's so little choice, there's such restriction on the choice that they have, that we don't remember to make the choices overt and make the I have a kid in my life who I adore, who, if you give them two choices, they will always try and come up with their own third choice, because that it's the autonomy that they want. And so what you can do is you can either redirect them back to you've got this choice or this choice, which do you prefer? Or you can help them, give them the parameters to come up with their third choice, which is like, okay, neither of these work for you. You need to do something that can be done in 5 minutes, that you can do with what we've got available at home, that isn't going to cause a certain amount of noise, maybe if you've got a baby sleeping or something, and will not going to cause any harm to you or any of the things in the house or the people in the house. So maybe that's it. And then you can get them, I mean, that point their brain starts thinking, so you can then maybe come up with other options that come up, but they can also come up with options when you provide that structure and that support for them to do so.
One thing you had said, I have here, choice and options are two important things. I think there's a third, which is discussion, like actually having a conversation and discussing the things to discuss the options and choices that we have at hand, but to start conditioning children to know, like, you can talk about this stuff, you can ask for what you need, you can throw noodles at the wall. Like, these are things that need to be cultivated in children just as much as anything else, but to like talk about what's going on. Like, you get into these triangle dynamics, and so often we're like, oh, this is what's going on, and it's like, well, as we were saying when we were talking about the movies initially, we don't always know what the backstory is. Like, and with a child, the backstory could be something just as fantastical as a
dinosaurs
Hollywood movie.
And unicorns. And bears, oh my. So the funny thing is that an interesting thing is that the conversation isn't just a general thing. You can also have conversations about the process. Now, obviously, there are going to be there are times when there's space for this. There's times when there's limited time, and maybe you're not able to provide as much choice. And if you can explain that, they won't necessarily like it, but it's also about letting them know there's a reason behind what is going on right now. And again, their rational brains aren't going to be developed in the same way. They're not going to be able to respond to that way. They're not going to be like, oh, thank you, mother. I wasn't aware that was the situation. I will be perfectly fine with that. That's unlikely to happen. And it can help.
That's unlikely for adults to do at this stage of the game.
It's very true. So one of the ways in which discussion can be really helpful is around the options and choices. So for example, because sometimes what can happen is you can give a kid two options and they pick one option and you go, well, I know the other option is actually the better option here. And in that situation, adult might go, well, I'd go with that one if I were you, but without a discussion behind it. If you explain, so there was a situation where I knew a family who they had multiple children, and there was like an investment program where you could win prizes every month for being a part of it. And all of the kids had these accounts, and they had a certain amount that they were that they had invested. So they got certain prizes every month. And at one point, the oldest, because what they were doing was they were pooling the winnings. So so if one of them won, then they all split the winnings between the three of them. And one of the kids at one point went, well, but what if what if I win like a big prize? Like, I don't get to keep that, I have to share it. And I remember the parents saying in that situation, well, it's up to you. If you've got a 1 in however many chance of winning it by yourself, if it's the three of you, you've got a 3 in however many's chance. You triple your chances of winning it. But the other thing is, like, what happens if if your sibling wins the $1 million prize? Are you going to be okay if you don't get a split of that? And at that point, they were like, oh, okay, then that's a good idea. And sometimes it can be helpful to have that conversation with them. Sometimes it's helpful to actually let them see the consequences of the choices and the things that are in front of them in order for them to experience it. Because again, the child's ability to really imagine what that's going to be like and how they're going to feel. I remember another situation that was, I heard about it, I think in a book or in a program I was doing, where they would, when they were running errands, I think it was one place they used to go, and they used to be given, they were given, I think it was like 3 candies. There were 3 kids and 3 candies. They were given to one of the kids, and the adult said, well, you can do what you want with them. Like, you can share. And it was interesting because the person at the shop was like, you're not going to force them to share it. And they were like, no. And they decided to have them all themselves. So the next time when somebody else got the candies, they didn't share either. And that was the point at which the kid was like, oh, okay, maybe there was a better way of doing this. And then they all had a conversation, and then they made the decision that they were going to share going forward.
It's kind of like the same principle as, like, don't touch the stove. That's hot. That's hot.
Yes.
That's hot. Like, I mean, you don't want anybody to do harm, but there's a certain point that, like,
you're not going to intentionally allow harm to be done to them, but if they do it, then they're going to learn it in a way that they're not going to from being told it.
Right. Thank you. I'm like, that might not have been the best example for that, but that's like, don't touch the big red button. Well, why? Because I said so. Don't touch the big red button. You're not going to like the consequences of it. Like,
oh, and that's it. Well, that's an interesting one. So it's like, don't touch the big red button. And that's the thing. In general, we get taught, don't push the big red button. But I saw a thing where it was like, I think it was a bathroom in a rest stop somewhere in the US where it says, don't touch the button. But when you push the button, music comes on and lights and a disco ball and everything. So it's that whole thing. Sometimes you need to try it to figure out, is this going to be a problem or is it not? And then you use your experience to then go, well, based on the experience, 90% of the time, the big red button is a bad thing. This one time it was one thing. It's probably still going to be a bad thing generally going forward, because that's what the more likely option is. And there may be times when it's worth it.
I'm worried for myself now, because if I see a lot of rest stops in my travels, like if there's a big red button, that could go either way really quickly. But now I'm like, it's a perfect example, because I hadn't really considered the fact, like, I'm thinking the big red button, like Pinky in the brain, like the missiles go off or everything self-implodes, like or something.
With the car and what have you, like, don't push the big red button. And then, but then there's a moment where you need to push the big red button.
Yeah.
So, like, we've talked a lot about children. Is there anything else about the child thing that you want to add in before I move on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about that I think still fits under the umbrella of what we're discussing today?
Well, just the presence of adult children in movies, but I'm not sure if that's...
I think that we'll get onto that in the movie episode, because I think that that's more about the movies than about the children necessarily.
That's fine. This is what happens when we split an episode mid-taping. Like,
and we go rogue, and it's like, what are we doing now? So moving on from the child's specific situation, I think that it's also important to talk about how when we are looking at the and this came from us looking at movies as examples of this. We will get into the movies next time, I promise. But one of the things that is important to understand in terms of the nuance when it comes to the shapes is recognizing that if there are power dynamics in place, it can sometimes skew or create a lot of nuance around the shapes. It makes it a little bit less easy to it's a little bit less straightforward. So for example, one of the things I was thinking about was like one of the examples I was looking for in movies was I was looking for an example of like adult to adult bullying. That's a really obvious one, and normally one where there are witnesses. So I was looking for something that I thought would be a good representation of the harm dynamic. Now, in a lot of the instances where those things are represented in movies, they're often in a workplace dynamic. And a lot of the time, the person doing the bullying is the boss. So there is a power dynamic that affects the ability for somebody to, how somebody is going to move within that situation, what their options are, the ways in which they can get into the empowerment ecosystem. They can still get into the empowerment ecosystem, but it's not quite as clean and clear cut. If there is somebody who has the ability to determine whether or not your needs are going to be met or unmet or impacted. So that was one of the other things I wanted to say is that is that we want to make sure that when we are looking at this, we are being aware that there are other things that can affect these things. So it's like, yes, we might be the persecutor approach to somebody else's victim approach. And that may be because we are the victim approach to somebody else's persecutor approach. And it may be that those are both harm dynamics. Like we are the objective victim of somebody else's harm, and their control over us is coercively controlling us to then harm somebody else. So we then become the harmer to somebody else's objective victim. So this is the reason that, I mean, and that sounds quite complicated, which is why it's kind of very tough to. I was looking for an example that would represent this, but the second you start to realize that there are other layers, so when you start to look at where there is privilege, like if there is a situation in which, for example, if there is a misogynist joke that is told, and you are the only woman in a entire room full of men, what you are now, creator approach, probably just going to get yourself out of there. But your ability, what your options are, because of the power, the social power dynamic that exists there, it means that it is not as easy to deal with that situation if you were a man hearing a sexist joke or a misogynistic joke in a room full of men, because that power dynamic doesn't exist in the same way. And obviously that's just looking specifically at, are you a man or are you a woman? And obviously there are obviously gender fluid, non-binary options as well. I'm not just using that as a specific example, but also then you have, well, are the people, what race are they? What sexuality are they? What level of are they able-bodied? Do they have a mental health condition? Do they have a chronic health condition? There's all of these other things that when you start to layer them in, it means that these situations, as I said, we've made this very simple because it's easier to understand when it's simple. And once you get it at a simple level, it stops becoming simple, because at that point you can then start to layer in, look at all the nuance and the dynamics that are affecting it that will potentially affect how you're viewing it. It won't be quite as straightforward as it initially seemed.
I'm going to suggest that we have a printout that can be attached to the show notes for this one. So for the next episode, you can have all the shapes there so you can see what we're talking about right in front of you as we're talking about these shapes, because that was something when I visually was trying to do it in my brain, and why we put the you know, the shape we're talking about up on the screen.
There should already be the PDFs of the shapes are already done, and they will have been put out with the different episodes where we're talking about the different shapes. So we'll make sure that we put a link to that wherever you can get that. We will make sure there's a link with this episode as well, so that you can look at it for this one and also the movies one as well.
Yeah, it will be so much more helpful for you to have it like on the screen and be like ping ping, like when you can see it ping from like when you're doing it in your brain, it's confusing enough, but when you see it in front of you, it actually simplifies it a bit to be like, yeah.
Yeah, and the good thing is that once you can see it to begin with and you start to understand it, then you don't need to see the shape in front of you. I mean, I could tell you where anyone is at. I don't need, the shapes are like burnt into my brain. Like there's no way I could unlearn those shapes if I tried, I don't think, because they're such a, and this is the thing is that I've been using one of these shapes for, I would say, best part of 10 to 20 years. The second shape,
we came up with that when you were in the UK.
Year or two, maybe. Oh, was it when I was in the UK? So that's the
first time the ecosystem came in. So, however, the shape has evolved.
It's evolved, yeah. So I mean, we're talking probably 5 years or so for the second one. The last one's been 2 weeks, but it's so important and it's so entrenched because I've needed this shape for so long. I'm like, aha, we have the shape. So
the concept was something you operated from, just the actual...
Yes. The shape to explain, because I think that's the thing is that I could articulate it, but again, unless you can visualize it and see the shape in your mind, that's the point at which, and because it was so easy to put these examples onto the drama triangle, that's what people did, and it's like, no, that's not quite what we're talking about, and that's the reason. So once you understand them, you're going to be able to call them out without needing to have the PDF in front of you. But to begin with, it's super helpful.
I mean, and initially that's what we did. We had the drama triangle, and then there was a green triangle, and then all of a sudden it was like, there is a huge element missing here. What is this? Yes. And then it really started evolving. Like, oh, like these are all in motion. These are like Claire said, they overlap, they layer, but it's not necessarily.
It's very rare that you're only going to be in one position and stay in that one position for a consistent period of time. Unless that position is creator approach. And that's the thing, that you're choosing intentionally to stay in that approach. And even then, you're probably going to move into supporter and contributor when you are interacting with other people. So like the chance of you staying in one place, almost non-existent, I would say. And then the last thing I want to say, like on the topics that we've been talking about today, before we move on to the movies next time, is that it's generally easier to spot these situations with the harm dynamic. They tend to be clearer than the others. It tends to be easier to spot and easier to figure out. And that is true when there is something physically happening. It tends to be a little harder to spot that the harm dynamic is in place when the things that are happening are more emotional, psychological, intellectual that are going on. That does not mean that the harm is any less severe. And as people who have done a lot of research on different problematic groups and control groups and those sorts of things, that a lot of the time when these groups become exposed, it's because there's a physical element of that it relates to them. Because that's the thing, people go, oh my God, that's horrific. How could you do that? But when you look at people who've been involved in these groups where coercive control is a very dominant force, you will tend to find that the emotional and intellectual and the psychological, the spiritual, the energetic abuse that has taken place actually has done far more harm than the physical harm has.
Absolutely.
So it's so important for us to start to notice the harm dynamics specifically when it is in instances where there is not a physical altercation involved. Yes, if somebody walks up and punches somebody else, That's pretty easy to see the harm dynamic in that. Trigger warning, I'm going to talk about different kinds of abuse now. If there's a sexual assault that happens, it's pretty easy to see that. Like, who is in which role and all the things. If somebody is engaging in coercive control, if somebody is engaging in financial abuse, if somebody is engaging in manipulation, those things are harder to spot. But if they are actually the harm dynamic, it is so important to start to be able to see them when they are happening, because when you are talking about if you don't recognize the harm dynamic, as we said in the last episode, the harm dynamic is the most important part to recognize and address first before you start layering the other shapes on top of it. If you start to focus on the other shapes without acknowledging the harm dynamic, who is responsible, where the accountability needs to be, who is the victim in this situation, the objective victim in this situation, where should the support be going in this situation, then you're going to end up probably doing more harm. So it's really important. And you see it all the time when people talk about abusive situations that they've been, like abusive relationships. Well, why didn't they leave? Like, that's one of the first things that people say. Mm-hmm. Well, for a start, it is the most dangerous time for somebody in an abusive dynamic. When they leave is the time that their life is at the most risk. The highest risk is when they leave. So they may not be able to leave. If somebody is in that situation, they might have this person may have the complete control of all of the finances. They may have no ability to make their own money. They may have none of their own resources. And so their life could be at risk by leaving this situation and jumping into another situation where they've got no home, no finances, no support, because sometimes those things have been taken away from people. So it's really important for us to recognize and understand where is the responsibility in this, and start, when we are communicating about these things, putting the responsibility where it lies and communicating it in language where it is clear where the responsibility lies. I had an idea that I had a example that popped into my head and immediately popped back out again, and I'm trying now to so great example, which is like if a woman is attacked and the question's asked, like, what was she wearing? That is one of those things where, by asking that question, there is an implication that there is some kind of cause and effect between what she is wearing and the fact that she was attacked, which makes it in some ways her responsibility. The truth of the matter is the person who attacked her is responsible, irrespective. And actually, there was an interesting art exhibition a while ago, and I can't remember what it was called. We'll find it and we'll put the link in the show notes, where it was clothes of women who had been attacked, so you could see the different clothing, and it wasn't what people think that those things are going to be. So and if somebody is has been harmed, making sure that the onus is on communicating that this person harmed the other person, not this person is the victim of this situation. Because again, we want to put the responsibility where it lies. So we want to be able to spot these dynamics. We want to be able to communicate them clearly. And we want to make sure that how we are communicating about them does so in a way where the responsibility is made clear. Who is it that is doing the act that is harming, and how we are communicating about it communicates that harm is being done. I felt like you were wanting to come in with something.
I do. And it, like, the second you stopped, it was like everything stopped. My brain stopped. So we're going to get into this in the next episode, where we give you some examples where it is like, it's not about you, it's about the characters that are in these movies. And I invite you to start looking at the situations that are fictional, or like, start by looking at movies, television, and finding this dynamic, and finding this dynamic in its nuanced little spaces, in the spaces that Claire was just speaking of, where it's not like overtly physical, like obvious harm. Because when you start to notice these things, you'll start to notice it more in your daily life. And like everything else that we do, like the chances of you coming off this episode being like, I know what the harm dynamic is, I'm going to intervene, I'm going to do it in the contributor or supporter role, like getting all of those things right away, instantly, and doing it in a way that's effective. Not saying it's not possible, and is it
Unlikely.
realistic? But yeah, maybe not. But being able to see it from the outside, and then you'll start seeing it. Unfortunately, you'll start seeing it in your life. You'll start seeing it in your relationships. You'll start seeing it with your closest people. And you may not speak to it initially at first. Like, if you're able to, yes, stop the harm that's being done. Like, that is like, if you're able to do that, and don't feel like, I don't want people to be like, I'm not going anywhere near the harm dynamic, because that means if I witness it, I don't want to be in the harm, or I'm just pretending this doesn't exist. Like, embrace the fact that it doesn't exist. And as you're able to, start with your closest people, as we say with so many things, like start pointing it out in the places you feel safe, so that when it comes to a situation where, you know, it's not in your comfort zone, you're more likely to be able to respond in a way that's in the empowerment ecosystem rather than in the drama triangle.
Right. And there is something, again, we're going to get to this a little bit more in the next episode, which is sometimes the intervention may not be within, like, the thing that we are able to do may not be able to affect the harm dynamic that we're witnessing, but there may be things that we can now go to, like, for example, if we're talking about a systemic issue, we might not be able to help in this one incident, but we can be a part of starting to make shift and change with the systemic issue, both within ourselves in terms of educating other people, yada yada yada. So there are things that we can do that sometimes sit outside what we like, because we look at this immediate situation and go, well, there's nothing I can do about that, so I'm not going to do anything, without recognizing there are things that we can do to intervene in the wider dynamic that's going on when we're talking about power dynamics. The other thing I just wanted to add, as like when I was talking about when we're naming the harmer, a great way of starting to notice this is start to look at newspaper headlines and start to look at how they are positioned, who is being named, and is the is the terminology being used active or passive? So, for example, is it saying that somebody was killed? So the focus is on the victim and the fact that they were killed, or are they focusing on the person who did the killing and the fact that they murdered these people? One of those, like, or killed is slightly different, because there is definitely an active element to that. But like, somebody died, like so and so died in this situation, which sounds like, oh well, they just died, as opposed to somebody else murdered them. That, like, if you understand, like, if you can see, there's a difference in the language, and notice on the instances where we're using, who's being focused on, how are they being described? Are we focusing on this is something that they have done and it's being framed as an action that they need to take responsibility for? Or is it being framed in a passive way where it sounds like, oh, this is just something that happened and they happen to be a part of it, but it hasn't really made clear where the responsibility is? And are we focusing on the victim and who they are, how they were dressed, where they were, what they were doing, what their history is? Or are we focusing on the cause and the reasons why the person did the thing that they did? And so, like, that can be one. Not that most people read newspapers. I mean, you can look at it on social media, on like news websites, those sorts of things, TikTok captions across the top, those sorts of things. That, like, the modern day newspaper headlines is what we're talking about, where it's like, if you start to notice that, you'll start to see, and then look at how would you phrase it so that you can make sure that the onus is on the harmer and on the thing that they did. So again, like, a lot of the time when we're talking about sexual assault cases, the focus is on the victim and the fact that they were assaulted, not on the perpetrator of that assault and the fact that they assaulted another person. A lot of the time you'll notice that sometimes people are referred to as like a young woman. They might be 8 or 12 years old. That's not a woman, that's a child. And they talk about, like, for example, they might talk about non-consensual sex with somebody who is 14. A 14-year-old cannot consent to sex because they're a child. That's not sex. That is a sexual assault.
That's rape.
So it's,
yes,
exactly. And this is the thing. It's like, we need to name the thing as the thing, and name it in a way that puts the responsibility on the person who is the harmer in this situation, so that as a society, we can start to look at what is happening and see these dynamics more clearly for what they are, and putting the responsibility where it needs to be in order to affect change. So this has gone we did not expect this episode to go any of these ways, quite frankly, and we've covered a lot of things. Goodness only knows what we're going to name this episode. I have no clue right now, but we'll figure it out. The good news is we know exactly what's coming next. And it's so frustrating. It's so funny because like so often we don't know what's coming next. And then we plan these episodes out and I tell you what's coming next. And then life be lifing and the universe takes us in a different direction. You get a little bonus in the middle. But next time we will be back and we will be talking about understanding the shapes in the context of movies. And we'll break all of those things down. And I think that what we've discussed today will become even more apparent when we start talking about those things and you start to see the examples. It will make a lot more sense, I promise you. But between now and then, thank you for being, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, the drama triangle doesn't apply to children in the same way as it does to adults. It's the responsibility of the parents and caregivers to provide an environment for them to start learning about the empowerment ecosystem.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.